Uh, Hi guys, my name is Vivek and I conduct DI and LR sessions for iQuanta. I used to be the past uh, center director for Time in Goa. I recently quit that particular business and I am now conducting online sessions for iQuanta. In my past, I have trained more than 3,500 students across various colleges in Goa, which is there. I also converted IIM Ahmedabad in 2010. I did not take up. Previously, I was working in companies like GE and HSBC before I started Time. Okay, roughly, I have about 8 years of experience in teaching at Time in Goa. Now, if you, I'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes before we go to this session. I will put it on screen share mode. In case you're not able to hear, I would suggest please put up your microphones in order to listen to the session carefully. I'll I'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes for others to join in. I'll put that in a screen share mode till that time. Okay. Uh, Guys, in case you're not able to hear, please connect your headphones. I would also suggest you also have a look at look at your phone connections. I've tried and tested it at least 3 or 4 times today in the morning, so it works perfectly fine. There might be a problem with, there might be some lag, etc., which is there. I'll give in about 3 to 4 minutes for others to join in before we start up this session. Hi guys. See, today we'll be discussing about how to go about the LR and DI section in uh, for the CAT examination. We'll also look at certain other things which you can do for IFT, ZAT, NMAT, CMAT, etc., so on and so forth. Okay. Now, the problem with LR and DI section, and it has actually been blown out of proportion over the last 2 years, is because people did not prepare for LR and DI separately for 2 years in CAT. Okay, around somewhere around CAT 2013, CAT 2014, CAT used to have just two sections. One was maths, and DI was included in maths, and then you had English, and LR was included in English. Okay, so people who used to be very good in maths, they used to just skim over the DI part which was there. Similarly, people who used to be very good in English, they used to skim over the LR part. It was not a focus area as such, even though between them, LR and DI constituted about 1/3 of the paper. Okay, now when CAT shifted back to the 3-section module which was there, and then they added time limits also, the first time around people were caught by surprise. Okay, and last year what happened was that people were not prepared for the type of LR questions which are there. Now people started preparing for a lot of calculation intensive, lot of so-called ultra tough optimization sort of questions which are there. I personally feel that there are two problems which happened with LR and DI section last year. Number one, there were plenty of easy questions, and when we will briefly look at the type of questions which came up in CAT last year. The type of questions which came up in CAT were not difficult. Okay, if you look at analysis by most major players, roughly about half the questions, at least 3 to 4 sets, were easy to moderate. In fact, in the evening session, probably there are more moderate questions also, according to the analysis by major players. The problem was that every question in the set was not the same difficulty level. So people thought that, okay, if I do 2 questions, I'm not able to do the other 2. What is the point of doing the set? So people went around going round and round and round in circles, which was, and they ended up solving nothing. Okay. The second biggest problem which happened in a DI last time was that people were expecting a lot of questions on calculations. While the calculator was required, the calculation was required, people could not understand how to link the data given with the questions which are provided. Okay, a lot of times what happened was people thought that this is the data as it looks. Okay, but when they went down and looked at the second level of data, they cracked the first logic. Most people cracked the first logic. It was not very difficult. There were hardly any graphs. Most of it was in table or in case format. Okay, but when they went into the set, okay, they got stuck with a lot of calculations, either a lot of calculations to do or a lot of logic to be applied over there. Now, this sort of a problem usually takes care of who is prepared properly and who is not prepared properly. I have a theory about setting very tough papers. Okay, if you make the paper extremely tough, it is not a good sign of people. It's not a good indicator of the testing abilities. A very easy paper, even if you make one mistake, you end up missing out. Good students end up missing out, and that might not be because of their ability. When you have very tough paper, okay, and this has happened in previous cases with ZAT also. What happens is that when you have a very tough paper, even if somebody gets a fluke of 1 mark, okay, or one additional question or 2 additional questions just by fluke, it basically rewards that person very, very highly. Now, you would assume that on an overall basis, fluking will eventually work out, but that is not the point of CAT anyways. A good exam paper should be able to differentiate between a well-prepared student, a student who is talented enough but is not hardworking, and a person who is both talented as well as hardworking. Okay, this is the idea of most management entrance tests, and I thought in the LR section and DI section last year, that balance was lost a little bit. This is not a criticism of the paper, but it is just my personal opinion as such. Now, let's actually see what the paper actually looked like. I'll go back to the screen share mode. I'll continue speaking as such, but I will, for a minute, I will go to the screen share mode again. Now, last year's CAT, basically, if you look at the type of questions which came up, okay, even a score of say about 35-ish. If you look at a score of 35-ish, 35, 36, okay, that was enough for you to get more than 96, 97 percentile. About 96, 97 percentile is what is required for about 36. Okay, so which means roughly about 12 questions would be able to give you that particular percentile. 12 questions out of 32 in about an hour's time is too small a number to decide on 96, 97 percentile. But if you were to look at it the other way, very few people were able to crack that level of logic. The biggest reason why this happens in CAT is specifically because the type of questions required two levels of understanding. The first level was to understand what the data was. Second level was to understand what the question actually asked. The questions were there were some questions that were extremely easy. There were some Venn diagram questions, very simple table-based questions, which if people had chosen, they would be able to answer those questions pretty easily. On the other hand, if they got stuck with some caselet sort of a problem where it was a new sort of scenario, completely stuck. Okay. How do you tackle such a scenario? The reason is the solution is also very simple. Just as the questions are very, very tough, you need to understand that you give up straight away. If you are prepared, if you have taken a decent set of mocks and analyzed them properly, please rest assured that if you are finding it tough after that level of preparation, the others are also going to find it tough. Okay, there will be some who will probably escape the sieve, but very, very few people are going to fluke their way through the exam. This area, my biggest problem was this region. Okay. Here, one fluke or probably one question gives your percentile score up by about 10 to 12 percentile points. Another one fluke here will probably give your percentile points by again up by 10 to 12 percentile points. This is a pretty critical percentile point, somewhere between 70 to 90 percentile, because a lot of college cutoffs basically end up hovering around this line. Okay, most of the IIMs, if you clear 90 percentile in sectionals, you should be enough to go through to the next round, if obviously there are academics and all the other areas, but the sectional requirement is usually 90 percentile. Okay, most of the tier 2 colleges, they usually do not have anything beyond 70 percentile. Okay, so this just two questions could actually have made a difference between getting to a tier 2 college and getting a call from a top IIM, obviously if the other percentiles also hold good. So this level of variation in in scoring was a little unexpected, and people were actually frustrated at the end of their results because they could not attend to those questions which are there. Okay. Now, what were the type of questions which were asked? The morning session was basically very similar to the evening session. Both of them were roughly evenly distributed. Evening did not have a grouping sort of a part. Morning had another question on grouping. But other than that, if you look at it, most of the questions which came up in these areas were pretty much the same. There were about 7 to 8 questions which could be said calculation-based DI, about 4 on logic-based DI. Venn diagrams was there in both the sessions. Then you have puzzles and matrix-based arrangement for the LR part, which is there. Again, if you look at the analysis of most major test players, anywhere between 10 to 12 questions in the morning were easy to moderate, which means they could be done straight away. Okay, and in the evening session, somewhere between 12 to 15 questions were easy to moderate. Okay, now if you had attempted 12 questions and got all of them correct, that is 36, which means you're about 95 percentile. This is where you are at, and you clear the sectional cutoff straight away. You can actually forget the rest of the questions which are there. Now, in this sort of a paper, let's see what exactly do we need to do in order to get over this sort of a paper. Okay, besides these areas, okay, you also will be preparing for other areas which are very frequent in DI and LR, which are also used in exams like IFT, ZAT, SNAP, etc. Okay, let's go through those areas before we go through the strategy part of it. Okay. Besides those areas in IFT, what we have seen is that a little use of ratios, percentages, and fractions are there, and some basic speed maths, which is type calculations, are also required. ZAT LR is basically a decision-making session that is very different than normal LR questions which are asked. There are one or two analytical reasoning questions which do pop up in between in the ZAT paper, but overall decision making is usually a completely different session, completely different section for ZAT compared to all the other areas. Okay, in the non-IM sort of categories, okay, if you have IFT, NAT, and other exams, in LR you also have questions on syllogisms, which is all A or B, all B or C's, etc. Those type of questions. You have blood relation questions which came up. You have what is called a sequential output tracking. You get a set of input and you're required to find what is the output going to be. Actually, a type of question like this, which is on coding and decoding, also came up in CAT in the first session last time. Okay, so that first, I'm not exactly sure about the slot, maybe first or the second slot, it came up in that slot also. So it was, people were taken aback that this type of question actually came up in CAT also. And then there are series based problems. So you have a couple of numbers, etc. given, and you are required to find what is there. Now, while we will be covering these in our LRDI course for iQuanta, our main aim was to look at how to strategize, how to prep, etc. for mocks, because all the mocks have actually started. About 5 to 7 mocks are there, have been done for most major test players. So let's see what exactly goes into mocks, analysis, and all those things. Now, I've just listed out some of the most frequent mistakes that people make when they go to mocks. Okay? When they go through mocks, most people make. Okay, the first, and I have seen that in the classes also which we conduct, is they don't read the questions after reading the set. They go directly into trying to solve the questions. Okay, they try to get a full, they will try to solve the full set before reading the questions. Okay, and this is one area where people miss out on easy or doable question. Even if it is not easy, at least doable questions which come up in most of these entrance exams. Now, what do I exactly mean by not reading the question? Suppose you have decided that you're going to attempt a particular set. Okay, so you read the type of problem which is there. So about 3 minutes to read the problem, 2 to 3 minutes to get the basic understanding of the various, what is the various interaction between all the sets. Okay, all the information which is given. Now, at that point, before you draw a diagram in case of an LR, or before you start drawing a table to tabulate all the data and calculate, I would suggest first go and look at the questions which are there. Okay, I'm not asking you to fluke anything, but at least read the type of questions which are there. Okay. Find that there might be 2 or 3 scenarios, okay, and that comes out as a theta sort of a question. Think about it. I mean, this cannot come as a theta sort of a question. You cannot type cannot be determined as an answer, okay, which means you are actually missing out some of the problems which are there. Okay, similarly, if you have all 4 questions which are theta set, I mean, this came in CAT 2015, where there were some questions which were just type in the answers, some sets which are purely type in the answers, and there are some questions which had, all of them had options. Okay, you cannot have 4 theta questions which all can be determined. Okay, in fact, none of them will be cannot be determined, because there is no option to type in cannot be determined. Usually you have a number to be typed in. Okay, so this is one thing which which will give you a clue on the type of questions which are being asked. Okay, second thing is, if you go through all the questions, you will usually find, even with a cursory reading, even with a cursory reading, okay, that some of the questions, okay, where to approach, what are the things to calculate. Suppose you have a lot of data to be given, a lot of data which is given to you, and there are 4 or 5 things which I need to calculate. By reading the questions, you will actually be able to see whether I need to calculate all those questions or not, or whether I should be able to whether I should be required to calculate those values or not. Okay, so please read the questions. After 2 to 3 minutes that you have completed reading the initial data, okay, please go through the questions before you start solving the set. Okay, this is going to be my first advice. You're making this mistake, which is there. Okay, the second most frequent mistake that people make is usually around 30 to 35 minutes. Okay, after solving all the easy or so-called doable sets, they don't even get to the remaining sets. They are basically stuck over, okay, this set looks tough, this set looks tough, this set looks tough, this set looks tough. The fact is, if you have prepared well enough and you have done about 3 sets, okay, in about 25 to 30 minutes, okay, if you trust your judgment a little bit, the remaining sets are not going to be fully solvable. Again, because you have analyzed your past mocks. We'll also come to analyzing, how to go about analyzing. Because you've analyzed your past mocks and you have seen what are your strength areas, your weaknesses. After 30-35 minutes, it's very rare that you're going to get easy, doable sort of a questions. Either they will be ultra calculation questions, okay, or you will have to have a question where you'll have to read through the data again and again, probably 10 to 12 minutes just to read the data, and you might not get anything out of it. Okay, and that is where the next part also comes in. Okay, people start looking at the clock too much. I know there is 1 hour, okay, and you have to complete the set in 1 hour. Okay, but you have right now finished only 30-35 minutes. If you keep looking at the clock, you're going to get tensed. You're going to get tensed. You need to get the clock out of your head. Okay, and if it is not possible for you to get the clock out of the head, at least try to ignore what is there. Put a sheet of paper, worst case scenario, on the clock if it is there. Okay, or just move to the other side, take down all the data, move to the other side and go through the set and then come back. Okay, and that is where how you prepare for your mocks, how do you write the mocks actually makes a huge amount of difference. Okay, I have this very one of the proudest moments that I had was one of my past students. ZAT is not an exam where you get online computers and you have a clock on there. So he forgot to wear his watch on that day, and you're not allowed mobile phones. So based solely on how many questions he was attempting on a per minute basis, or how many questions, how much time did it take for per question, he had that data. He knew roughly what difficulty level of question will basically be able to basically require how much amount of time. He was able to even time his test even without using his watch. Even in the absence of a watch, he was able to allocate time limits for each of the 3 sections. Okay, so this is the sort of familiarity that you should have in terms of questions. Even without a timer, you should know this is the amount of time I'm actually. Even without a timer, you should know this is the amount of time I'm actually spending on the question. And the second thing which you should know is that do not have too much. Do not give too much weightage to the clock. The clock is going to run, no matter what you do. Okay, so be present. Be present at the moment. Make sure that you attempt that particular question. After 30 to 35 minutes, you are going to encounter slightly tougher questions. So be prepared for that. Okay. The next part is concentration problems. Most people do not have the stamina to go through a particular section. Okay. You do not have a choice of skipping the VA section. And I've seen a lot of students do this. They skip the VA section in the actual test, in the mocks. And when it comes to the actual test, because the VA section comes up first, okay, they are drained by the time they actually reach the LR section. Even if you're even if you're not happy with your VA section or completely prepared with your VA section, okay, you've answered it to the full, you do not want to give VA section in the mock, please make sure that you sit and concentrate on that section before you go to the next section, because in the actual paper LR is not going to be the first section, LR is going to be the second section. Obviously standard terms and conditions apply, they might change the order of the sections and all those things, but assuming everything remains the same, you need to have the same level of concentration as you would get in the actual test. So if the actual test is going to make you go through VA for 1 hour, okay, you have to go through VA even in the mocks. Okay, if you are not doing it and you're scoring well, remember it is going to go down because that is not the order that you're going to face. Okay, so these are the most frequent mistakes that I've seen people making. Okay, I'll go through to the next part, which is analyzing mocks. Okay. Now, one of the best quotes that I've heard is by Shane Warne. He said, he was talking about Monty Panesar. He was a pretty decent test bowler for England, but he said that Monty Panesar has not played 33 tests. He has played the same test 33 times. Okay, which means he was not learning from his mistakes. Okay, if you're going to give a mock, if you're going to spend 3 hours in a mock, okay, it is completely imperative that you analyze the mock before you go through. Okay, now what I mean by analyze, okay, now there are a lot of people with a lot of different strategies, etc. Now my personal advice is know which are the areas where you are really good at. When I mean good at, even on a bad day, okay, so instead of a linear arrangement, if you're very good with linear arrangements, okay, even if a linear arrangement with 5 different attributes to be done comes up, you should be able to reasonably do the set. You may not be able to do all the questions, but you may be able to reasonably do the set. Now, different people have different ways. There are some people who think that I will go by question, but you should know which are the areas where you make least amount of mistakes, even on a bad day. Similarly, you should know what are your weak areas. Just like in, say, maths or English, where you know the weak areas. For example, if you know sentence correction is your weak area, and if a sentence comes with just 1 error, there might be a chance where you can take up that set because there's just 1 error. But if you have 2 errors or 3 errors in the same sentence, it is highly unlikely that you're going to score in that particular question. Similarly, if you come to DI, if you know that you are very bad at blood relation sort of questions, or you're very bad at say Venn diagram type of questions, instead of attempting it straight away, I would suggest go and attempt something else. I'm not saying neglect Venn diagram. You still have about 4.5 months for CAT. Okay, do not neglect that particular area. But in the actual test, which you're taking right now, the mocks which you're taking, there is no point answering those questions because you're going to make mistakes. Okay, so instead of getting a negative mark and going through it, I would suggest go through the other questions and then come back. If you have time, go through the questions. There might be pretty doable questions because it's not rocket science anyways, which is there. So you should be able to identify which are your good areas, which are your bad areas. Okay, remember, at the end of each test, okay, you should spend about 1.5 to 2 hours per section looking at each question. Okay, and look for 2 things. Okay, the first thing that you should look at is, could I have increased my attempt by 2 or 3 questions? Because as we have seen, just 2 or 3 questions can make a huge difference from being a 75-80 percentiler to be a 90-95 percentiler. Okay, so that is number 1, which is there. Second thing is unrelated. Could you have gotten somewhere 5 to 10 extra marks? It's related to that. You may not answer the same set. You may not answer the questions from the same set, but realize that, okay, this is something which I left, which I should have attempted. This is something which I should have done, but did not do. At the flip side, why did I not get the time to reach this place? Because of my ego. Sometimes you have solved 3 questions out of 4, and simply because of your ego, you would end up trying to solve the 4th question as well. This is not an area where you can win an ego battle. The only one who's going to win an ego battle is going to be the person who said the paper. Because you might spend the next 8-10 minutes solving that one last question and end up messing up the rest of the section. Okay, so please do not make it an ego battle. Realize where you have made a mistake. Be calm about it. Okay. There are a lot of people who usually get scared when their percentiles start dropping. Okay, as mock, and you will see in the mock season as it keeps on going, your percentile keeps on dropping, fluctuating, either increase or decrease. My suggestion to all of them, instead of looking at just your percentiles, look at your rank. Look at your rank. Okay, to just give you a broad example of how things work. Time every year roughly has about 70 to 80,000 students who are classroom or test series students. Okay, CL and IMS will roughly have half of that number. But if you look at the per test, if you look at AIMCAT, SIMCAT, CL's test series, etc., the number of people who take these tests actually keep on dropping. And usually people who are doing well, they don't miss out on a test. Okay, so as the season goes along, you would see that a lot of non-serious takers have stopped giving the test. Okay, so I would look at, instead of just pure percentiles, I would rather look at 2 things. One is your rank and whether you have made mistakes from the previous, you're making the same mistakes which you're making in the previous mocks. Okay, those are things to watch out for. Okay, if your rank falls, then it's a little tricky. I mean, you are regressing. Okay, if you're making the same mistakes which you made in the past sets, you're again going through the same thing again and again and again, and you will end up becoming an Arsenal fan. Okay, you're going to think about it that in January I will win the league, and by March you're out of the Champions League. Anyways, this year they're not even in the Champions League. You will be out of, I mean, you will start going for the 4th place or the FA trophy. Okay, so don't be an Arsenal fan. Okay, be a fan for somebody else, but don't be an Arsenal fan. I mean, you are not going to get a different result if you're going to make the same mistakes again and again and again. Okay, in the future sessions, I will also share a Excel sheet on how to go about looking at each question in detail. What is the things to look out for? But this is like a bird's eye view of what are the things which you should and should not be doing in your mocks, which are there. Okay, I'll come back to the preparation strategy. Okay, now this might sound really odd for certain people, but this is my personal opinion. I would not use the book by Arun Sharma. Okay, I believe Arun Sharma is a very good book for maths. It's a very good book for maths. I personally feel it's one of the best books around after Sarvesh Verma. But for English and DILR, it's a pathetic book. Okay, because the type of questions are extremely monotonous. It is a pretty good book if you're doing a bank PO sort of exam, but if for bank PO, it's an overkill. Okay, if you're doing a SNAP, CMAT, NMAT, that exam, Arun Sharma is more than sufficient. Even for IFT, Arun Sharma is more than sufficient. But anything which requires some amount of logic, some amount of additional skill, Arun Sharma fails, and fails very miserably, because the type of questions are extremely repetitive. You get the same type of questions again and again. I would rather suggest you take one of these books which are there. There was also a book which was published by Time. It is now out of stock on Amazon. Okay, it was published by Pearson. Okay, so you can look at that book which is there. It's now Pearson just publishes the Nishit Sinha's book, if I'm not mistaken. But I would suggest look at the basic Especially practice books by Time, CL, and IMS, they are a very good source of questions. In fact, a lot of these practice books also contain some of the previous year's mock questions which are there. So you can actually look at those books. Okay, obviously the past and present mocks of these institutes will be pretty good. A lot of you will be taking more than one mock. I would suggest go with either CL plus Time or go with CL plus IMS. These are the two ones which have been most frequently used. I mean, I know I used to work with Time, but some of the Time tests were a little unrealistic in terms of the actual exam. This year, their tests have improved. This year, the tests have actually improved. I'm not bad mouthing my past business colleagues. It's just that this was an area of improvement which we always used to face. Okay, I've taken feedback from last year's students. Some of them found CL's test too easy, or their explanations a little too part. So, I mean, last year it was IMS, then followed by CL or Time. This was what the last year's part were. And I've seen from the previous two batches, most of the people have taken IMS mocks as well. Now, there are also certain other test players which are there, like which are not very well known. From those, if you want to take any of those, I would suggest take up Test Funda. Test Funda has a pretty decent set of tests. I have seen those tests which are there. You can look at Test Funda's tests, and you can probably look at Olive Board. Okay, at least go through some of the free tests which all these offer. It's like, I mean, you can at least get an idea of what is the interface that they're going to provide and all those things. Now, biggest suggestion: do not stockpile material. Okay, there is again, you will be making the same mistake which Monty Panesar did. He's going to play the same test again and again and again and again. Okay, if you're going to make the same mistake again and again and again, you're not learning. Okay, you're not going to crack the set or crack any information, anything new by making the same mistakes again and again. So I would suggest try as much as possible to experiment. Remember, the only mocks which actually matter are the last 6 to 7 mocks. Okay, somewhere around October is where your mocks actually start counting. Okay, till October you can play. When I mean play, literally play. I mean, yesterday Manchester City beat Real Madrid 4-1. Okay, but when it actually comes to the season, it's very unlikely that that's going to be the same score line which is there. They were just playing. Okay, so that result is practically useless. That result does not mean anything. Okay, similarly, your mocks do not mean anything. The only learning that you can get out of your mocks is where are you making a mistake. Now, you will not know what strategy works, what does not, unless you start playing. Play with your mocks. Play with your mocks. Try to go for different strategies. For example, go with a strategy where no matter what happens, I will attempt all LR questions. See what happens. No matter how difficult the paper is, I'll attempt all LR questions. That will really test your mettle on that. Then try another one where you'll attempt all DI questions. I know it's a stupid strategy, but see what actually happens. Go to another case and try for 2 to 3 mocks. And there are most of these test players also provide additional practice mocks. I mean, they are not all India mocks, but they are retired mocks. There are questions which are from the previous mocks which are now used for some other full length tests. You can call them full length tests. Try doing something like this. If you eliminate 2 options out of 4, which means it's a 50-50 scenario, try taking a chance. Attempt all 32 questions. Let's see what happens if you attempt all the 32 questions. Okay. These are the things which you should try out in mocks. This is the idea behind mocks. You know that you're not playing your full strength. Okay, you are basically trying a particular strategy. And unless you work out these strategies yourself, what works for X will not work for Y. Okay, please do not go behind approach, method, formula, shortcut, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I've worked in this industry for about 8 years. And the only thing which actually works is what you can do. Okay. Instead of taking information from a lot of people, instead of taking information from a lot of people, I would suggest take information from a limited set of people, okay, who you trust. Okay, now that is the biggest problem, who to trust. That is the biggest problem, who to trust, who not to trust. Okay. So once you realize who to trust, who not to trust, make sure that you take their take their word properly. Please trust them. I mean, please look at the experience of the person you are actually taking information from. Okay, has he given CAT? Has he have some information about the type of students which are going into the exams? And remember, it's the thing is not about clearing the exam. You also need to prep for your group discussion, interviews. That strategy should also be there. Remember very clearly that cracking the exam is just one part of it. Okay, it is a very important part of it, definitely there, but you should also start preparing for the second stage as well. Okay, so look at a case where instead of just looking at approach, method, formulas, I am always of the case. I'm always of the I'm always of the belief that instead of learning 50 different things, okay, learn 5 things and use it in 48, 49 ways. Okay, you're more likely to be successful. Or even if you learn it and use it for 45 different things, that's better than learning 50 different things to solve 50 different questions. The more you learn, the more shortcuts you learn, the more approach ways that you learn, etc., it's going to be really bad for it. Okay. One thing, and a lot of you are members of different groups which are there. Do not attempt problems in DILR which are posted on the group which do not have keys given. Okay, or which the reason is very simple. Unless the keys are given, it's pointless solving the problem. I mean, the same DILR problem can be solved maybe in 3, 4, 5 different ways. Okay, I'm not asking for solutions. I'm just looking for keys. Okay, if you don't know what the key is, the final answer key like option A or option D or cannot be determined or 20 as the number, if that information is not given and that's not the correct answer, I mean, that's not the correct information, do not go ahead and solve those problems. Because end of the day, you're doing this for practice, not for your own knowledge. Okay, you're looking at these questions as practice, and many a times, even if there's a slight error in the question, you might end up not having the correct answer, and you can probably spend 2 days without any answer key, and you will end up you will end up losing that much amount of time. So do not solve problems where the answer key, the final options to be entered are not given to you. That is my advice to you. And even when you post doubts, when you ask to somebody, please make sure that you post the answer keys so that it will be easier for the people who are solving the doubts to do that, because you're not testing their knowledge of whether they can get the right answer. The biggest idea is to see whether your method is better than their method or their method is better than your method. That is what you're looking for. You're looking for different methods to go about it. You may not take it. My thing is, if don't follow somebody's method, but at least see what are the options which are available. Okay, but finally find your own approach, find your own method. Okay, I'll end this session with I'll finally end this session with something very important for all of you. Okay, now CAT is just one exam. Okay, you're going to probably face more trickier situations, tougher situations, more demanding situations in your life. Okay, please make sure that you enjoy the process. Please make sure that you concentrate when you're studying for CAT. Using a WhatsApp or a Facebook while you're studying for CAT is not the best way to do it. Yeah, we conduct classes on Facebook, but you also have an option of making sure that all the other notifications are muted. Please use technology wisely. Do not be a slave to technology. Make sure that your attention span is there 100% when you're solving questions. Even if you spend about 2 to 3 hours, even at this stage, even if you concentrate properly for 2-3 hours max, and probably stretch it by additional 3-4 hours on a weekend, if you can squeeze that additional time on a weekend, that is more than enough to crack these exams. This is not a 10-hour IAS, IIT JEE knowledge sort of exam. This is an application. Okay, this is not a test on trying to find out how the internal combustion engine works. This is a driving test. Okay, I know most people in India don't give the driving test, but assume that it's a driving test, and you'll get the driving license after clearing the driving test. Unfortunately, you cannot bribe the inspector over here. Okay, we will hope to continue these type of sessions later on. Okay, in case you have any comments, feedback, queries, etc., you can always reach us at the iQuanta site. You already know. If you want to enroll for our batches are starting very soon. Please go ahead and enroll. The numbers are all given on your on the iQuanta website. I hope you found this session very helpful. If you have any comments, feedback, please do leave it here. Thank you very much for joining. Good luck.